Hello everybody, my name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today we're going to be returning to the wonderful Julie Roys and how she's canceling her own book because she's a groomer. And by her own standards, she is an abuser. So therefore we will hang her by her own standards in this video today. And we're going to be talking about how she is a groomer, she's an abuser, and it was written in her own book. And if her own story is that bad, imagine what the other side is, the person that she abused. Imagine what that person's story must be like, because Julie Roy's account is pretty bad as it is, and we're going to be looking at some of the screenshots from her book in this video. But if you didn't hear, Julie Roys is a groomer. So don't forget to like the video, also subscribe to the channel. And some of the worst people out there that I probably encounter on YouTube, underneath the William Lane Craig simps, but those are by far the worst YouTube commenters, are the William Lane Craig simps. Underneath that's probably the Julie Roy simps. Underneath that, there's a fewer of them. They're not as painful, I guess, but the people that think that she's this conservative bastion, she's going after John MacArthur for the right reasons, and she's not. There's plenty of reasons to not like John MacArthur, I guess, but Julie Roys doesn't have any of those reasons. She doesn't oppose dispensationalism, but she does oppose patriarchy. She does oppose that, and that's pretty clear in her ministry. So we're going to get some screenshots, and these screenshots are taken courtesy of watchkeep.org. I have no idea what the doctrinal alignment of this website is. I have a feeling it's not patriarchal. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm going to read mostly the highlighted text, but I might dive into some of the non-highlighted text in this excerpt here. So starting with the highlighted text, I was too hot to sleep, but too tired to get up. Something was bothering me, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Then I rolled over toward the inside of the bed and gasped. There, lying between my husband and me, was Sarah. I snapped into a sitting position, blinked, and looked at the bed again. Sarah was gone. It was just a dream, but I was shaken. So, Sarah is a pseudonym, by the way. That's just something to point out. So we'll continue with the next highlighted portion. Everything had begun innocuously enough. Sarah was a troubled teen. Wait, let me read before that. My relationship with Sarah had become obsessive. So that's what that dream's telling her. Everything had been innocuously enough. Begun innocuously enough. Sarah was a troubled teen whose tumultuous home life drove her to self-destructive behaviors. And as her youth leader, I tried to help her. So she's a youth leader in a church capacity. That's the context here. But my need to rescue her was sabotaging my marriage. Helping her consumed almost all my emotional energy, and the intensity of our relationship left little room for Neil. My dream shocked me into facing this reality, but I was so emotionally entangled that I had no idea how to extricate myself. How on earth did this happen? I was in my mid-30s, had been married nearly 15 years, and had 2 boys in elementary school. How did I get entangled in an emotionally dysfunctional relationship with a former student in our church youth group? What did it mean? How could I ever get my normal life back? I stay up half the night wondering if Sarah was okay. Then, when she'd cut off communication, as she often did, I'd pursue her aggressively. The more I'd pursue, the more she'd run, and the more I'd pursue. I became so preoccupied with rescuing Sarah from her endless dramas that my marriage suffered, my children suffered. I'm going to skip the part about her faith because I don't affirm Julie Roy's faith. My husband and I were going to marriage counseling at the time. Youth ministry had taken its toll on us. The line between our ministry and our personal lives had become blurred, even non existent. I had told our counselor about my childhood habit of rescuing stray animals. The more desperate and pathetic they were, the more I wanted to shelter and care for them. So when I described Sarah to my counselor, she exclaimed, "You've just gone from saving stray animals to saving stray people." I knew she was right and that this insight was significant. I didn't know how or why. Sarah was one of the most gifted and charismatic people I'd ever known, but in some ways, she was a stray, lost and looking for a home. She had two parents living in her home. Both of them were so broken themselves that they were unable to provide the emotional support and boundaries she needed. Now, just a note here, she goes hard on describing this Sarah person's family life, and it's probably crossing some boundaries that she thinks that using a pseudonym was probably acceptable to cross. So it's borderline, considering the abusive nature of this relationship. Yeah, it's not good for her to tell about divulge all these family details. I first met Sarah when she was a senior in high school, so a minor. A friend brought her to our youth ministry, and I immediately liked her. Over time, I got to know her well, and she began to open up about her family. Her father was an alcoholic, a truly pitiable person, if there ever was one. He was kind and generous, but haunted by his past. Sarah told me that he had been abused by his own brothers as a boy and was constantly trying to drown his demons with alcohol. But he had a radical conversion experience when Sarah and her sister were little girls. He had sobered up and began taking his family to church, and for several years he had been the father Sarah and her sister had always wanted. But then something snapped and he returned to the bottle, began avoiding his friends from church, and retreated to himself. By the time Sarah and I had met, he was completely absent, which is odd because what happened to she had both parents in the household or whatever. He never came to any of her events, and when she was home, he was never truly present. A few years after my relationship with Sarah ended, he committed suicide. So again, that's not really relevant. Like, you didn't need to say that if it was after the relationship ended. But, she's kind of like really tell a story here. Had Sarah's mother been emotionally available to her, her father's devolution might have been bearable. But her mother was apparently possessed with much of Sarah's charm and charisma and used her skills to manipulate her daughter to satisfy her own narcissistic needs. I remember two of Sarah's friends once recounting that they had saw her mother speak kindly and affectionate to Sarah one minute, then without any seeming provocation, she started screaming and belittling Sarah. Sarah hated her mother but desperately loved and needed her too. Whenever Sarah talked about her, I could see the tangled web of love, hate, and the need fighting a tug of war inside of her. I felt immense compassion for Sarah and communicated it. So now I'm just going to skip to the highlighted portion. Wait, this is key. She had her mother's keen emotional perception and her ability to manipulate. That should have been highlighted right there. Because what we're seeing right there is the fact that Julie Roy's is passing some blame onto Sarah, the Sarah person, for emotionally manipulating her. Now, according to the feminist logic, if ever there's a power differential, therefore the person with the power is inherently the abuser. That is the standard that a feminist like Julie Roy's keeps, so that is the standard that I'm holding her to, regardless of my own personal views on this matter. For reasons neither of us knew at the time, I needed to be needed by Sarah and to take care of her. Just as I had with those stray dogs and cats, I felt a compulsion to rescue Sarah. Sarah would exploit this need, often relaying stories of horrific things her mother had done to her by making her appear to be in need of saving. She'd also relate things that her mother would say about me, indicating how jealous her mother was of the relationship I shared with her daughter. I'd seemingly brush these things off, but deep down, I liked taking her mother's place. I like being needed and playing the role of the savior. So Julie Royce clearly has a savior complex. And, again, emotionally damaged youth are who groomers and predators prey on. This is just a fact about grooming. If you look at someone like Jerry Sandusky of, the Penn State locker room story, he preyed on boys who had no father figure. That was a thing. And likewise, she is similarly vulnerable. Going to the next highlighted portion. I love the blend of our voices, and singing together became like a drug to me. Eventually, Sarah divulged that she struggled with attraction to other women. She also told me about a relationship she had with a lesbian that she feared might become romantic. As a professing believer who had grown up in the church, she knew that the Bible condemned same-sex relationships and that she didn't want to go there. I didn't know much about same-sex attraction at the time, but given Sarah's immense wounding from her father, and especially her mother, I wasn't surprised. And just to tack onto that, given Julie Royce's relationship with her as an adult woman who's well beyond the half your age plus 7 rule, there's a lot that isn't surprising here. Now, again, is this something that she should have written? I don't think I have too much issue with her publishing this, but publishing the fact that this girl's dad committed suicide was a little unnecessary. My determination to rescue Sarah intensified. I had friends who were part of a healing ministry that helped people with all sorts of troubles, including sexual brokenness, so I talked to them about how to help Sarah. Soon they sensed that Sarah wasn't the only person who needed help. I'm not sure you're the one to help Sarah, a leader told me. You seem too emotionally invested in this. I was furious. They didn't know me or Sarah. How dare they? I think maybe you should let go of the relationship and let someone else step in. The leader urged. I had shrugged off her suggestion and decided that I was going to save Sarah. I was uniquely positioned to help her. She needed me. The truth is, I couldn't let go. I didn't want to give up singing with Sarah. I couldn't imagine someone else taking her place. Beyond that, I didn't want to give up the relationship I had. I had become emotionally hooked, and the thought of ending the relationship killed me. Deep down, I knew something was seriously wrong, but I didn't want to admit it. I couldn't admit it. That is, until I had the dream. I didn't know what to call what I was experiencing. I didn't know how or why I'd gotten so emotionally entangled with someone so incredibly dysfunctional and needy, but I knew our relationship was unhealthy and dangerous. I needed to get help. So I want to pause right here. This sounds like that Julie Royce was also bad for Sarah. Like her need to help Sarah was probably keeping Sarah dependent on Julie Royce. And that's probably why those ministry leaders said, no, you got to take a back seat here, girl. So that's probably why they said that. I didn't have to end my relationship with Sarah. She did it for me, running off with the woman she had told me about and cutting off all communication. I was wrecked. My relationship with Sarah had opened up an incredible need and longing inside of me while simultaneously satisfying it. I felt as if I was going through withdrawal. It was excruciatingly painful. Keep in mind, excruciating is a reference to crucifixion, like cross. So that's excruciating. Crucifixion, I guess, would be another root word. But the death of my relationship with Sarah was a severe mercy. God had lovingly, if brutally, opened up this wounded place in my soul, and he was going to perform surgery. And here's another cringe line below. Obviously, I had my own void that made me susceptible, but Sarah was like a vacuum cleaner, and I was like a piece of lint. Unsuspecting, powerless, and consumed. Unsuspecting, powerless, and consumed. She's literally blaming the person who didn't have the power dynamic, her standard, not mine, for this relationship hurting both parties. This is terrible. She is a hypocrite. She's an absolute hypocrite. We're going to talk about her response to being called out on this. I wasn't the only straight person who ever got sucked into her emotional vortex, and I thank God my relationship with Sarah never developed into anything physical. Well, how far did it go, though? Emotionally, you were probably romantic, but physically, not so much. That's probably where the boundary was. And women are certainly more interested in the emotional part of a relationship, and she was probably denying that to her husband, as she aforementionedly referenced. So she's in a sense, she was committing adultery on her husband. To this day, I'm not even sure how to describe that relationship, but the experience made me suspect that all the categories of attraction our culture had so skillfully created aren't necessarily as cut and dry as everyone thinks. So again, I don't think they're that. I don't understand what that part means. So the next part, I guess, has more to do with her journey through self-discovery and stuff like that. I really don't feel like reading the rest of this drivel. It's just interesting that this is Julie Roys. This is the real Julie Roys. When you give her a position in church leadership, this is the fruit. So let's read the Julie Roys tweet. So Julie Roys tweeted in response to this passage, or basically her book being read for the first time. And let's just read her statement. In my 2017 book, Redeeming the Feminine Soul, I relay a story that emerged from what I remember as one of the most painful times in my life. I shared the story because it showed how I had failed to help a troubled teen because I had not first dealt with my own issues. And by telling the story, including my own missteps and the subsequent journey to healing and wholeness, I had hoped to encourage others to recognize their own issues and do similar work. To be clear, I shared the story of Sarah to communicate the ways in which I was wrong and to warn others of similar pitfalls. It was then and remains now a difficult topic for me. Over the past several days, I've been confronted for the way I framed the story, especially assigning blame to someone who at the time had been a student in ministry I helped lead. It should have been obvious to me that I held a position of power, feminism. I regret I didn't see this at the time I wrote the book, and I regret that I didn't own it more fully when I first when this was first brought to my attention recently. I am very grateful to a faithful friend who compassionately yet honestly reached out and helped me realize my error. When someone who holds the balance of power feels powerless, it is concerning and it is wrong. For me to write I felt manipulated in the relationship, for example, was completely off. And the fact that I only recently recognized my fault shows that I clearly have more of my own work to do. I regret now that I shared the story of Sarah framed the way I did. That chapter reflects a moment in time, a Polaroid of my pained posture and my limited understanding to that date. I have reached out to a trusted professional to help me process what remains a painful memory and help me remove any blinders that remain. Because of the work I do, I understand how important it is for me to grow in this area, and I'm committed to that process. Thank you to those who have pointed out these painful truths to me. I am so sorry for how this has hurt so many on so many levels. I am especially sorry for how it may have hurt Sarah. May have? You published her personal family details. I have pulled my book from my website and Facebook page and have initiated conversations with my publisher about next steps. I remain open to your input and constructive criticism. So that's Julie Roys canceling her own book. She is pulling her book, probably going to do a revision of it and a second edition to save face and to save money. But here's the thing. Julie Roys obviously did not sell that many copies of her own book. And I say that because this was only discovered just now. And let's be real on why the reason was discovered. She acted like it was her own camp that divulged the details to her. No, this is her website, the Roys report, or the Re report as I like to call it. And if you look at it, 3 John MacArthur hit pieces are pinned to the top of her website, which she spends thousands of dollars on, despite the fact that I spend comparably far less for very similar and aesthetically more pleasing results, if I do say so myself. So she has 3 pinned hit pieces on John MacArthur. Again, these are hit pieces. And John MacArthur didn't actually do any abusing. Julie Roys did. The hypocrisy here is overwhelming. It's just overwhelming. I am stunned by the hypocrisy of Julie Roys. I knew she was bad news. I knew she was a feminist. I knew she was someone who did what she did because she hated the church. But now she's a hypocrite by her own standards. She should be canceled just like her book is canceled, because this is what she'd want to do for far less grievous offenses. So that's not all I got to say about that. I do want to close by talking about, I got into doing Evangelical Dark Web because I was dissatisfied with the current state of Christian media. When you look at people like Julie Roys, publications like Christianity Today, Christian Post, certainly the Gospel Coalition Today, this is what passes for mainstream Christian news sources, and these websites suck. These websites hate the church. These websites publish false teachers, promote false doctrine daily, and yet they're huge. They're huge. Let this story bring down Julie Roys. She is a hypocrite, and thank God that people are exposing this hypocrisy. Woe to her. Woe to her and her hypocrisy. So, and her audience. Her audience is also as hypocritical for standing by her in this time, because her tweet that had that statement had a lot of positive feedback, and that's just cringe. She is a hypocrite, and she should quit while she's behind. That's all I got to say about that. My name's Ray. If you like the Evangelical Dark Web, do also subscribe to the channel. Is the least you can do. And the most you can do is become a supporter, a paid supporter at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. That'll be linked in the description below. We don't use Patreon because Patreon censors. We don't use we don't create a fake charity by using a liberal college as a money laundering scheme like Julie Roys does. You got to actually support us directly. We're not a charity because this is a news gathering. It's not charity work. So, and we do partisan endorsements, so we don't do 501c3 crap. So that's all I got to say about that. My name's Ray. Have a blessed day. Let me know about what you think, about what I think, and I will catch you on the next one.